Welcome back to another episode of Savor Food and Body. Chef Shannon is joining us again today, and we're recording this about in the holiday time. It's a few days before Thanksgiving for both of us here in the US. And so we thought it would be a great time to come in and talk about taste and flavor. What does that mean? How do we build flavor? How do we build taste? Maybe what's the difference between taste and flavor? I know from a dietitian and intuitive eating counselor perspective how I would define those, but I'm really curious to hear how Chef Shannon's going to define those. And really, taste and flavor is such an important part of finding satisfaction with our meals any time of year. But the cool part about doing this work in the holiday season is there's a lot of variety of foods that are out either at parties you're going to, gatherings you're going to, or even just different ingredients and different store-bought items that you might not see in the stores otherwise. So it's a great time of year to practice finding what tastes and flavors are satisfying to you, and of course, practicing honoring those instead of having any diet culture thoughts wrap into your head about that. So, thanks for joining again, Chef Shannon. This is going to be really cool. And like I said, I know my definition of taste and flavor, but I'm super excited to hear what yours is as well.
Well, thank you. I think if I look back on things, Thanksgiving or this what we call Thanksgiving or Friendsgiving or however you want to call it, it's my favorite time of year. Um, and I think what I love about it is bringing friends around my table and sharing stories and meals. And I get really excited about, being able to share and just to hang out with good folk, And I can tell you for facts that in the 25-ish years that I've been doing Friendsgiving, it's progressively gotten more and more stressful. And like I feel like, I'm always having to, I have a timeline. Here's my cleaning schedule. Here's my baking schedule. Here's my shopping schedule. Here's how I, have, everybody bring all this food together to be able to create the meal. And the one thing that I always forget and I'm constantly reminded of it is it's not necessarily about this particular meal or the non-negotiables of the turkey and the mashed potatoes. It's about, sitting together at the table and enjoying each other's company. That's that's where I'm at in this stage of my planning and shopping for sure.
I love that. We both, you and I both worked for Whole Foods, natural foods in a
Table.
long, long time ago, and we overlapped, just barely didn't overlap, I should say, with each other. And to me, this time of year, that was one of the coolest times to work grocery retail, especially natural food grocery retail, because it was also about honoring the harvest, which to me is my understanding of Thanksgiving and giving thanks for the harvest and the people that grew our food and are helping bring it to the table. And it was just such a cool time of year, super busy, super stressful, but it
Yes,
was a cool time of year to be able to help people, just like you're saying, really surprise and delight those customers to
yeah,
make their holiday the best and maybe help reduce some of that stress too,
yeah,
whether it was like help them find another side or come up with a different recipe for somebody that was attending their party that couldn't eat the X, Y, and Z, whatever food limitations someone might have had. So super fun. But you made a good point too, to not get lost in all of that stress that we can often add to the holiday because I got to do all the things. I got to get
yeah,
the taste and flavor that this person wants, and I got to make this person's favorite
yeah,
recipe,
yeah,
and then we can get lost and like, wait, what are we even celebrating? Oh, right, friends
right.
and gathering and sharing a meal together
Nailed it.
and honoring where the food came from.
Right, totally. I think for me, like, as a chef, I feel like I have to, I have to flex. I have to, everybody's coming over to my house, Chef Shannon's house, to be able to have this experience. And to be honest with you, and I know this for facts that, the majority of the people that come to my house could give a shit about, you know, uh, this new, recipe I tried out or so on and so forth. There's non-negotiables for folks. It's mashed potatoes, it's gravy, it's the stuffing, it's the, the pie, it's the whatever. And it's the, the goodies that they get to, take home and enjoy in their pajamas the next day. But mostly it's about like we sat around the table and the candles were burning and there was good music going, and we didn't vilify what was on our plate, and we just enjoyed each other and enjoyed each other's company. So, I think that's a constant reminder that I have to give myself that,
Yeah.
like, Amanda, if you came over, I'm going to feed you. I'm going to give you what feels satisfying to you. And I enjoy making it for you.
So what I'm hearing is there's not a lot of diet talk at your table, probably,
There's not,
which is amazing.
give all of I try to, like, give everybody what they want. But, there's non-negotiables. There's the turkey. I dry brine it. I buy organic. I actually love turkey as a protein. I think it's delicious. So I buy one a couple weeks ahead of time. I use the bones for stock, and for me it's something that I really look forward to. So the turkey is a non-negotiable. My son loves my stuffing. I make sourdough stuffing. I make sourdough bread. Uh, I always make sure that there's a loaf or two at the table, and then I also bake it earlier in the week. That way, it's fermented. It has the flavor profile. I know that it's good for him and me, because of course. And so, sourdough stuffing is something I do. I make a vegetarian version, and I make a sausage stuffing that's, again, one of those non-negotiables. I make mashed potatoes. I don't mess around. I don't. I'm such a traditionalist. I can add in a little bit of yogurt or sour cream, and, I use a ricer to make absolutely beautiful, smooth mashed potatoes. And those are just something I look forward to. And after I eat my mashed potatoes, I don't go, "God, I really feel bad about the fact that I ate my mashed potatoes." I think of it more of, golly, I got to eat these really delicious mashed potatoes that I've been looking forward to all year. So gravy is another thing. I start making stock ahead of time. Salads, we'll talk about salads, but sides, and there are so many different ways that you can go ahead and really get creative with what's on your table. But non-negotiables and absolute delicious satisfaction, maximizing that flavor profile that sometimes you don't need to vilify, you know
100%. What I think is funny about when you mentioned, yes, this is a big holiday for you because of your background being the chef, and everybody's like, "Oh, I'm going to Chef Shannon's house." Nobody wants to come to my house. Nobody wants to come to the dietitian's house. I mean, people that know me and what
I
kind of
do.
dietitian I am, they're like, "Yeah, that would be amazing." But in general, like, I don't see many private practice clients. And this week, people are traveling, people are having their joy and their satisfaction with their food, as they should be. I do more of my work is kind of in between the holidays, like, let's digest the chaos you created in your head around what you ate, and maybe
Yes.
the chaos around family dynamics and all of that. But just as you were talking about that, like, isn't this ironic? This is a perfect time of year to have a chef and the dietitian conversation. So, but what I also love what you were talking about with the stuffing, what I was hearing is the different layers of flavor. So both from, I know the flours that you use are as local as possible flours, which are going to have flavor there. Again, thanks to the farmers who are growing it, the millers who are milling it and building that flavor in. But then that whole process of making sourdough, that's building in some flair too. So I think that's a really good recipe that we can use as an example of these different layers of flavor and taste and texture too. And then how else you said you have your non-negotiables, but what do you think about when you're making those non-negotiables, building in the flavor, building in those different tastes. Because most people are going to have mashed potatoes, stuffing, turkey, gravy. But I know yours is going to be different than everybody else. So you're starting with the same core, we might say, non-negotiable type recipes. But what do you do to kick those up a notch in the satisfaction area by building in flavor and taste? What do you think about when you're building those non-negotiable
Yeah.
dishes?
You know what? Non-negotiables for me, are absolutely, turkey stuffing, mashed potatoes, cranberry, gravy, those types of things. However, how many people are really going to notice that maybe you added a spoonful of miso into your gravy? Nobody ever will notice that you switched out, a couple tablespoons of sour cream with Greek yogurt. Nobody ever noticed that. I also take my vegetables like Brussels sprouts and I roast the hell out of them and I toss them with a really bright, vinaigrette. It's satisfying. It balances. My stuffing, I absolutely will throw in a little bit of sausage, but does it need it? Absolutely not. Can I do a mushroom stuffing? And I do. I roast it really hard. I get the good caramelization. I get that umami flavor. I give you everything that you expect from your non negotiables. I want my stuffing. I want my gravy. I want my mashed potatoes, the brightness from cranberry. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, I don't mess around with cranberry. It's sugar, it's cranberry, period. Done. Because I love the celebration of the flavor profile. I think it's amazing. I don't wanna add orange. I don't wanna add anything else. I just think it's that, when we look at the Thanksgiving plate, we think about sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami, all those, flavor profiles that you and I have talked about. And I think the Thanksgiving, plate is a perfect example of, all of those things. So, yeah, no, there's, ways to mess around and there's other ways to, still keep satisfaction where you might not even notice that, the extra tablespoon of butter is there or not, and the extra, bit of fat or whatever. I think it comes down to the fact that I made something that smells good, tastes good, and that you are completely satisfied with this beautiful plate of food that you do not need to apologize for the next day. That you are just like, oh my God, this is such a celebration on the plate.
And a celebration of taste and flavor. So you mentioned there are the 5 tastes, right? So the salty, sweet, bitter, spice,
Sour umami. Yeah.
sour, umami. Yeah. And so thinking about, and this could be the case with any meal that we're building for ourselves. Satisfaction, and what we don't often talk about in the intuitive eating space, because we're not always looking at it from the culinary standpoint. But satisfaction comes from, yes, the nutrients that you're eating. And if you eat enough, call it protein and fiber, you're going to feel satiated longer, full longer, satisfied longer. But that satisfaction also comes from that most, if not all, of those senses of taste have been hit. And the number of times that I've had conversations with people where they get stuck in the ping pong between, I want something sweet. Well, now I need something salty to balance that out. And our taste buds, I think, are designed to want all of those 5 tastes. And when possible, if they can show up in a whole meal, which this time of year where we're eating, say, more complex meals because we are
Yeah.
taking the extra time to have those more in-depth recipes, it's a really good time to explore and experiment. Like, what is it like to have that whole plate of food? And you have a little bit of something from each one of those taste categories, or at least a food that hits those taste
Lucky
categories.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's amazing. I think it's an important part for people to understand that satisfaction comes from not just you're eating enough, you're getting in enough nutrients, but it more importantly perhaps is that you're balancing these tastes when possible. So you already mentioned miso as a way to get in some umami. It's also a great way to get into some salt. I call it salt with character so
Yeah.
that we're not just going for that salty taste. So especially if people maybe they have blood pressure concerns or something. So we want to give them the most taste satisfaction, maybe with less sodium or just more bang for their buck if they have a hard time with high salt meals, whatever. So
Right.
so miso is one of those. What are some of your other like go to secret ingredients that you'll use within whatever dish it is to make sure that you're hitting up those different taste level or taste flavors, and people may not even know that they're in there. Like you said, the miso and the gravy.
Yeah, the miso and the gravy is one, but I also think about like, I don't know about you, Amanda, but I remember going over to my grandmother's house and, especially in the holidays, like the smell of roasted meats and things like that. There are so many things you can do ahead of time, but there are very specific flavor profiles like the mashed potato. Does it need all the butter and all the sour cream? I mean, hey man, it's dressing your tongue in a fur blanket. Yeah, it's lovely.
We were talking about cozy season. That's like cozy season for your tongue. Yes.
Yeah, you know, but like, is it more of a celebration of the potato itself? We have so many. I mean, you and I are both from Washington, but Washington and Idaho and Oregon potato growers, these potatoes are delicious on their own. Most of the time, when people add in all the fat and add in all the other stuff and the things, maybe it just needs a little bit more salt. Maybe it needs that little bit more of a savoriness. You know, like really kind of like impacting flavor whether that's the stuffing, for example, and using sourdough, like, yeah, it's an extra step. Do you have to make it? Absolutely not. You don't have to make it. Can you go to the grocery store and buy sourdough bread? Is it better for our guts? You name it. Yeah, it is. I mean, this is like, beautiful, gorgeous bread. However, I can get this down the street for $4 and, I have a lot of bang for my buck. It's sour. It's a little salty. It's got the umami. And when I add it in with my stock, whether that's a mushroom stock or, you know, what have you, like it has a big impact of flavor. Roasting things to be able to bring out their natural flavors. Um, so for example, if I took mushrooms and I roasted them hard, they go to be, they start off being soft and aromatic, and then they go to be intense and meaty. Adding that delicious meatiness to your stuffing, to your side dish, that is an element of surprise and deliciousness. So, absolutely, you can, be able to have so much more fun with your food. You know what I mean? Do you
So it's
agree?
not just yeah, it's not just the ingredients that we use in some cases. It's the sourdough bread or the miso, talking about the specific ingredient, but it's also the technique that we're using. It's the
Mhm.
roasting, it's the sautéing, it's choosing the oil that we wanna use for the sautéing or the butter or whatever. So it's the technique that we're gonna use too. Maybe there's some the roasting, maybe there's some fermentation, maybe there's some pickling. I don't know, this is the dietitian trying to come up with all the culinary techniques, but
No,
it's
that's
using
perfect.
those culinary techniques. It's the toasting of the nuts or the seeds that are going on something or in a salad. So that's another important thing
Perfect.
for listeners to take home too, is it's not just about the ingredients. Like many folks know that I kind of live in a food desert when I'm in my mountain life, and we're kind of shortchanged in terms of the ingredients. But if we can get creative with some of those culinary techniques, we can still build in those flavors into our meals, given whatever ingredients that we have too.
Absolutely. You brought up, toasting. When you take a nut, whether it's pecan or walnut or a pine nut or almonds, and you toast them, you bring out their essential oils and you actually add an exclamation at the end of that flavor profile. So if it's almond, now it's It's really, it's super intense. And you just ramped up the flavor profile by 100%. And how amazing is that? You didn't have to do much but apply, a
Yeah,
specific cooking technique to that ingredient. It's the same thing with roasting. It's the same thing with, softly sauteing an ingredient. I'm going to do a dish that is basically, I'm going to be poaching pears to add to a salad that has, I'll be poaching them in red wine, and then I'm going to pair them with blue cheese and then wild rice, which is super intense and grassy and beautiful. The blue cheese is intense as it is. The red wine pairs up with the blue cheese, and I'm going to add it with arugula, which is peppery. All these things, you have that bite on your plate. You have just amassed like all of the different, senses, just on a fork. And how cool is that? You have the roasty, you have the toasty, you have the umami, you have all these really beautiful flavors. That is like the prime element of, creating a delicious meal.
absolutely. There's a book that I think I lent out to someone, I don't think it's come back yet, but it's called The Flavor Bible. I know you and I've talked
Mm,
about it before. So for folks, if they're listening and like, gosh, how do you guys even know that there's these 5 senses of taste? Like, what does that even look like? The Flavor Bible is a really great resource for that too. But even more so, Chef Shannon and I have been working for months now on putting together a culinary education course, online course for folks that want to learn how to do exactly what we're talking about, but even do it on a Wednesday night. It
yeah.
doesn't have to be a big production like it is with meals and gathering meals that we're gathering around this time of year. So, for more information on that, and even more so, get on the waiting list for when that course is going to be released in 2026. There's a link down below, and you can click on that and get on the waiting list because we're going to have a whole module on exactly what we're talking about here, and of course, handouts and stuff too. Are there other resources, Shannon, that you would steer people towards if they wanted to learn more about, like, how do you build this flavor in meals?
I think, the most important thing is to honor what's on the table. So if you're going to do a turkey, make sure that, you know where the turkey is coming from and that you are honoring what's in season. I think that's really important, that we always kind of circle back to that, that what's in season generally is going to be the most delicious. For example, I went to the farmer's market today. I bought these little pumpkins. I'm going to fill them and stuff them with, a savory corn pudding with cheddar. And it satisfies, not only, it's the sweetness, it's the creaminess, it's the delicious, but it's so full of flavor. So really honoring, what's in season, and then, and where you're getting your food from. So, and treating it with respect. Most food that we are, able to get this time of year really doesn't need that much adulterating. Like a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, or a little bit of brown sugar,
Mhm.
and and God forbid, a little bit of butter. You are going to have an amazing spread on your dining room table that your friends and family are able to, to be around and be completely satisfied, and will be talking about and thinking about for weeks and weeks.
100%. Well, to find out more about the online course with Chef Shannon and I, you can go to alpinenutrition.org. There's more information there. And of course, listen to other episodes that Chef Shannon and I've done. We've done farmers market finds, a couple of different episodes there. And we're also going to have some other episodes on the holiday baking and how you can, how and if you even should change out ingredients when it comes to holiday baking. So again, you can honor that flavor, taste, satisfaction, and maybe even some health concerns that you have. So, thanks again for being here, Chef Shannon. We'll see you again soon. And
Yeah.
I definitely want to make a reservation for your Friendsgiving table next
Oh my
year. That
gosh,
would be
never.
amazing.
I always have room. I always have room at my table for you. Absolutely.